Welcome back. You're listening to Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest is Bob Stevens, the Vice President of Public Sector for Lookout. Bob, in the last segment, we talked a lot about the threat that agencies face, kind of how they're handling the threat, the banning of potential personal devices. One thing that I want to touch upon that we didn't maybe kind of worked around was the idea of policy. And you talked about in how certain technologies that Lookout provides that other people provide, kind of how they can ensure that you're meeting policy or following the policy. But what does the policy actually have to say nowadays? And how does policy need to evolve, or how has it evolved over the last 5, 6, 7 years? So from a mobile device security policy issue, is there enough? We need more? Is there always too much policy? Where do you see this?
I think that we're making progress, but there's still a lot of things that need and could be done. I say that because a year ago I would have told you that there wasn't any mobile policy, or if there was a mobile policy, it was you have to have an MDM, a mobile device manager. There wasn't around the other aspects of security that we talked about, giving you the more near real time analytics that you need on a mobile device. Recently, the DoD CIO has come out with some policy around protecting mobile devices, which is better. Again, still some work that needs to be done, but is better. The White House has also come out with some recent policy around their cyber initiatives. And we were very happy to see that mobile is even mentioned in the document, because in the past it hadn't been mentioned at all. So I think we're making progress, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in regard to policy and how to protect the mobile device.
That DoD policy I wrote about quite a bit. And one of the things that stood out to me, and initially we read it, we were like, okay, what's the big deal? But then as you got into it a little bit more, do you get a sense that they're looking at it from the right perspective, not just DoD right or wrong, but more about, are they incorporating all the challenges that have been emerging? You talked about the soft underbelly earlier.
Mm-hmm. I think that, I think they're doing a better job. I think, again, that there's work that needs to be done. They've called out specifically mobile device management. They mentioned MTP, I think, for the first time in the policy. I think the DoD has a good understanding of how mobile devices can be used to make the troops more productive and allow them to accomplish the mission in a more efficient manner. So I think that there's a strong requirement to use mobile devices, but they also understand that they need to start to secure them and provide the visibility that's required for the infrastructure.
It seems like the DoD has been talking about how to deal with the CAC, the Common Access Card, and their mobile device for years. There's a whole derived credential. We've been waiting for that story to actually happen. The pilots and the other pilot that they've been doing. Is there a light at the end of that tunnel? Can they eventually figure out how to do the CAC with the mobile device in some way or another, derived credential, whatever path they decide to go down?
I think that the technology is definitely there. It's probably been there for a long time. I think that the DoD has probably taken a little longer than they should have in order to get to end state. I think they understand what end state is, and it's probably the tunnel is nearing the end. But the unfortunate part is that they don't really do things in parallel. So, as you said, they got very focused on derived credentials and identity for the device, and the rest of it sort of waits until they get that piece solved. But I think it needs to be done in parallel to ensure, again, that you're providing the most secure environment that you can for the troops out there.
And what's interesting when you talk about identity management, I know that's a whole different discussion that we can have, is people want to move outside of the CAC, when they move outside of the HSPD 12 card, they want to move outside of PKI. There's other ways. Apple, kind of exposed that to the fingerprint potential. And I was at a panel recently where they talked about iris and facial recognition, so many other kind of modalities that they can use. It's a fascinating time around identity management and how, for instance, the mobile device world is really leading the way, not the PC world. I don't know if that's something that you guys are paying close attention to in terms of the modalities of potential identity management.
Oh, we're definitely paying attention to it because, again, it's another aspect of securing the mobile device. And I think you need to understand all of that when you're out talking to the government agencies out there, so you can help educate them. But as I said, the technology has existed for a while. We just need to help the government, sort of make a decision and move on to the next phase.
It's a great segue. We talked a little bit about policy, but the other piece of this is there are several initiatives that are underway for agencies to secure the mobile devices. Are you seeing any out there that really are making headway, or are agencies it's all very much piecemeal, meaning DHS has their car wash and people have app stores, but nobody's really coming together?
Well, actually, I think that as far as application analysis or application vetting, which is what car wash was intended to do.
And really, I'm just going to jump in, sorry to interrupt, but that's what we're talking about here. The device piece is very important, but it's the app on device that, in my view, and correct me if I'm wrong, is really the biggest threat area for a lot of people.
Well, I think it is a threat. I don't know that it's the biggest. Not the biggest threat.
I'll defer to you. You're the expert.
Yeah, it is definitely a threat. I mean, I think vulnerabilities are still the threat that are out there. And it's the thing that the government was really focused the most on when they started talking about mobile devices. How can I ensure that this device is free of vulnerabilities? They weren't really thinking about malware in an application. And I can tell you that, malware, as you probably know, is somebody doing something on purpose in an application to benefit from it. So the bad guys write bad code, but it's going to make it through a vulnerability scanner because it's not necessarily a vulnerability. The bad guys, they know that, all I need to do is get some malware on there and, I can pretty much own the device. So.
And especially if you connect that device back to your network, then they can just start the hopping issue too. That's a big concern, I think, for a lot of agencies and private sector organizations.
It is. And they should be worried about that. There's sort of no proof, but there is no proof, not sort of, but there is no proof that that someone hasn't taken your credentials off of your mobile device in order to access the network, but the capability is there.
Absolutely. Now, when you talk about threats, you talk about vulnerabilities. We talked about apps as one threat. Are there other types of threats that the federal agencies are really seeing?
Well, there's the man-in-the-middle attack. So as you know, a mobile device is trying to attach to every Wi-Fi network that it comes in contact with, and of course, again, the bad guys know this. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try and sit in the middle of that connection. And if I'm in the middle of that connection, I get to see all unencrypted data. I could potentially steal your, any data that's on the phone. I can look at your SMS texts, your emails, steal your credentials for login to other networks, things of that nature. So man-in-the-middle attacks are still something that they need to worry about. There's also phishing. Phishing is still the number one way the bad guys try and get into a device. And mobile devices aren't like PCs. And a PC, it's an email. And most people know or can recognize at this point, I've just been phished through email. But on a mobile device, I can phish you through an SMS text. I can send you an email. I can send you a link. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that I can potentially get you to click to download something that's not good.
And I think the SMS text is really the biggest concern, because you get a text from a number you don't know about. The first thing you do is you open it because, well, who's this from? Maybe it's someone who's borrowing a phone, especially if you have kids or your spouse, and maybe their phone died and they're sending you from a different place. What can be done to really ensure texts and SMS messages are secured, or at least not phishing attacks? With email, you have spam folders, but you don't necessarily have that with text, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're right. I mean, and it's really about the phishing that occurs. The texts aren't going to stop, and trust me, I could create a text that you would click on. I could make it look like it came from WTOP, and you'd open it up. And it's at that point that you want to be able to, catch it and then ensure that the user is notified, as well as the organization, so that you can stop whatever bad behavior it's trying to accomplish.
Bob, this has been a fascinating conversation. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. Before I let you go, I always like to ask some takeaways that the listeners should really keep in mind. So 2, 3, 4 things, whatever comes to mind about mobile security solutions, what should they keep in mind as they are going out there? I think, as you said, it's still the soft underbelly, and the fact is that agencies are really starting to understand the threats that they face. So how can they protect themselves?
Well, I think it's a few things, right? They need to understand the infrastructure. As we talked about earlier, understand the potential risk. It's not just the vulnerabilities on devices. It's also malware in the applications themselves. It's the man-in-the-middle attacks. It's the browsing that employees do. I think government agencies also need to understand that their employees are using their personal devices to accomplish work because it's easier for them. and it allows them to get their jobs done in a more efficient manner. And rather than sort of stick your head in the sand, start to embrace it and try and help the employees become more productive while ensuring that the security of the mobile devices is where you need it to be.
Do a lot of agencies, are you seeing at least the trends, they have MDMs, but they want to go to the next step, or do they not even have MDMs yet?
Most agencies do have MDMs, and I think they are ready to go to the next step. Unfortunately, they also have to embrace the cloud by going to the next step, because most solutions in the next step are SaaS products, or software as a service. So they sort of have to get over the fear of the cloud and understand that that's also a safe environment. But I think most of them, do have an MDM and are looking to go to the next step.
You talked about the solution where you do analytics, as you said. Are there other pieces and parts that can fit there? I mean, it's not just MDM and then the MPT solution, right? I mean, there's other pieces they have to worry about. We talked Drive Credential a little bit. That's we've talked about other modalities for recognition, identity management. Where else can agencies? What's if we had this conversation in 3 or 5 years?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure that I have the answer because I'm not a visionary, right? But I would argue that the government has to take the first step, which is to ensure that the mobile devices are secure today, and they really haven't done that yet.
And it's weird. I mean, does that surprise you when you go in to talk to clients and they'll go, well, we have an MDM, aren't we good? Do you have to explain to them, well, that's a nice step, but how often are agencies understanding that?
You're right. We do have to explain that there are more levels that they need to be concerned with, and it happens probably 9 out of 10 times. Most of them do believe, hey, I've got this MDM, and the MDMs are fantastic for policy enforcement. That's what they do, and they do it well. But we're teamed with the MDMs because of the additional security value that we bring.
Do you get a sense that the recognition that there is a threat for mobile devices is there? You can talk to a chief information security officer or a CIO, and they may say, yeah, we get that. But what about the CFO types and the chief acquisition officers and the program folks? Are they also making that connection?
I think they are. And, it's probably through the release of threats like dark caracol that we brought to light last month in January. And dark caracol is a nation state attack against pretty much it's global. It's not confined to any one area. But this attack is really takes over your device. And I think with evidence like that, I think it helps convince them that more mobile security is required.
You think between OPM and JP Morgan Chase, you think the security thing would be easy now, right? And protect data, protect the device was still a challenge. So I think we'll be having this conversation many times over the next 3 to 5 years. But unfortunately, today we are out of time. I'd like to thank my guest, Bob Stevens, the Vice President of Public Sector for Lookout. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Innovation in Government, sponsored by Caresoft on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search innovation.